Well, it is 10:01 on December 16th, 2024. So we'll call the meeting of the Bismarck-Mandan MPO Technical Advisory Committee meeting to order. We'll begin with a review and possible approval of the minutes from the November 18th, 2024.
Kim, we do need to call roll first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Roll call, please, Stephen.
Ben Arith.
Here.
Dan Shriak.
Here.
Thank you. Deidre Hughes.
Here.
Gabe Schell.
Here.
John Sackey.
Here.
Andrew Strami.
Here.
Jarek Wignes.
Here.
Greg Fazer. Mitch Flanagan. Natalie Pierce. Dean Schloss.
Here.
Will Hutchings.
Here.
And Cher Ripple.
Here. Thank you, Stephen. And now we will move to a review and possible approval of the minutes from the November 18th, 2024 meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes?
This has been move approval of the minutes as presented.
I have a first. Is there a second?
This is Jarek. I'll second.
Jarek, thank you. Roll call, please.
Ben Arith.
Yes.
Dan Shriak.
Yes.
Deidre Hughes.
Yes.
Gabe Schell.
Yes.
John Sackey.
Yes.
Andrew Strami.
Yes.
Jarek Wignes.
Yes.
Dean Schloss.
Yes.
Will Hutchings.
Yes.
Cher Ripple.
Yes. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Moving on to number 2, 2025-2028 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment. This will be a public hearing, but first we'll hear from Stephen Larson.
Thank you, Kim. Give me just one moment. I will share screen with everyone. All right, so pretty straightforward. This month we have processed one amendment, Exhibit A. It applies to the 24 through 27 and the 25 through 28 transportation improvement programs. Since we are still in 2024, the amendment was advertised for the required 15-day public comment period. We did not receive comments on this. The amendment is simply a cost estimates increase for a project in Mandan for a rectangular rapid flashing beacon installation at 4 locations, all school-related locations in Mandan. Those project cost increases are noted on the amendment form, and other details remain unchanged. Are there any questions from the board on this?
Any questions for Stephen on the amendment? Okay. At this time, we will open the public hearing for public comment on the 2025-2028 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment. Calling once for public comment. And a second time. Third call for public comment. Seeing none, public hearing is closed. What are the wishes of the board?
This is Gabe. Move to approve.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Ben Arith.
Yes.
Dan Shriak.
Yes.
Deidre Hughes.
Yes.
Gabe Schell.
Yes.
John Sackey.
Yes.
Andrew Strami.
Yes.
Jarek Wignes.
Yes.
Dean Schloss.
Yes.
Will Hutchings.
Yes.
And Cher Ripple.
Yes. TIP amendment is approved as presented. Item number 3, the Safe Routes to Services Complete Street Study. And I believe we have Mike Bittner with Bolton and Mank online to present the final report.
Yes. Good morning. Can everybody hear me and see my screen okay?
Yes, thank you, Mike.
All right. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to start with a quick explanation of some of the background related to the Safe Routes to Services study, and then advance into some of the key findings. But the vast majority of the folks that were kind of the compass on this project are in the room today, so I'll probably move pretty quick through the background, but try to hit on some of these items for those that are unfamiliar with the process. So the overall study, the Safe Routes to Service study, intends to aid in developing a comprehensive, integrated multimodal transportation network to allow for safe travel within the communities of Bismarck and Mandan for all users, including those populations of a traditionally underserved, vulnerable, disabled, or disadvantaged status. We have 3 phases. We looked at issues, alternatives, and implementation strategies. So let's look at demographics, so who this study is primarily identified for. Certainly we wanted to create a plan that was valuable to everybody, but also had a special interest as identified in the overall purpose statement. So 9% of our households in Bismarck-Mandan are below the poverty line, so almost 4,000 households. 10% of population is Native American, over 10,000 individuals, and 21% of households have one or more people with a disability, so over 9,000 households overall. You can see the map, some of the heat areas where we see the most convergence of the various populations we're trying to focus on improvements for. So why is this important? Well, these are the groups that are often required to use alternative modes of transportation just a bit more often, whether that be bike, walking, or transit. We had 242 ped bike crashes between 2018 and 2022. And of those, 55% occurred in our highest density neighborhoods of Native American and low-income populations. We also see about over 26% of our ped bike crashes were fatal. We're just a bit more vulnerable without a vehicle protecting us. And we also saw a significant increase in your potential to be hit if you're walking to and from work every morning versus driving. We also looked at kind of a macro scale as with the overall crashes. We found that kind of post 2019, we did see crashes go down quite a bit as we saw traffic volumes reduce. We actually saw our fatal / serious crashes per capita or ped bike crashes per capita start to increase, particularly as we look at this as from a percentage standpoint. This project was unique from the standpoint of overall process. I'd say most planning efforts are really technical in nature and then engage the public as part of the process, but our goal with this process was to be at least 50% focused on engagement, recognizing that a lot of the blind spots we have from a transportation perspective are things that we need to hear firsthand from the folks that are experiencing it themselves. And so it was a really intense effort, and we really tried to focus on strategies that were a little less focused on technology, recognizing that some of these individuals may not be tuned in to the internet access quite as well as we might expect. But we did have some other strategies that were online focused to really, again, kind of provide the overall collective of everybody that would be walking or biking throughout the region. A huge element was a community advisory group, or CAG. This was, again, a unique element of our process, not from the standpoint of focusing on stakeholders, but we did a budget for $10,000 from the overall budget to pay these groups to help organize events, but also pay for the events themselves. So this was really critical because this allowed, most of these groups you can see on the left side of the screen are, understaffed with lots of needs. And so being able to pay them for their time was really rewarding to give back to these groups, but it also really brought a lot of folks out to the specific events we coordinated with them. So this included the Missouri Valley Coalition for Homeless People, Sacred Pipe Resource Center, Youth Works, and Ministry on the Margins. And we got a ton of really good feedback from those groups. We did complement this with a technical barriers assessment that had 3 primary categories. We looked at activity based on who is moving, how much they're moving, amenities based on whether we had ped bike transit facilities, whether those facilities were easy to utilize, and then also barriers. Do we have to cross a high-speed facility, a high volume, whether ped bike crashes or a railroad crossing? So we merged all of that together, and through the oversight of our steering committee, we were able to identify a number of hotspot locations from an infrastructure standpoint, which you can see on the left side of the screen. And there's some pretty high-profile corridors, 7th and 9th Street, for example, in Bismarck, or Main Street in Mandan. I'm actually going to give a couple examples that are a little bit, I think, more in the vein of what this overall study is trying to accomplish. Roads like Airport Road or Shady Acres neighborhoods are areas that typically don't pop up as you look at transportation planning efforts on a macro scale. We also looked at priority strategies, which I'll talk about those after these examples here. So this first example, this is the Airport Road corridor. I think this is, again, just a great example of the types of things that you find when you're looking at planning needs through a different lens. This corridor, certainly just from a pure transportation standpoint, has 5 lanes with only 7,000 cars, not a lot of crashes. It wouldn't be highlighted in a lot of your typical screening mechanisms. But as we look at the needs, what we heard from folks that were trying to utilize this corridor was, we're trying to connect Heaven's Helper Soup Kitchen and Closet. We also have the Dream Center, Tatley's Eagle Park, which supports the Capital Farmers Market. There's a lot of demand. There's also, as we think about the west side of the corridor, a lot of low-income housing. East side of the corridor, a lot of industrial-style work, the shift work, and so the connectivity is pretty natural east and west. And so, trying to think about this corridor from that standpoint really highlighted the fact that we've got a lot of pavement for cars, and we don't even have any sidewalks throughout the area. And although the frontage roads work pretty well to move people in the summer, it can be pretty tricky in the winter. So each of these priority areas, what we developed is a 2-page 11 by 17 cut sheet. So the front page was our issues. The back page is a number of solutions. As we look at the back page, we really wanted to focus on really low cost, high impact solutions, the types of things that we can implement in the short term, whether that be using transportation alternative dollars, highway safety improvement program money, maybe SS4A, demonstration funds, flex funds, et cetera. Items that aren't full recons that we have to program 20 years from now, despite knowing that we have needs here today. So you can kind of see some of the smaller scale items as we look at, I guess there's no such thing as smaller scale when you're talking about this much sidewalk, but a variety of sidewalk connections, also some crossing improvements, as you can see on the right side screen in blue. Those are the sidewalk gaps, and then in orange, those are some of the crossing locations. And then looking at the potential for a road diet, and again, not trying to get into the dirty details of the specific concept of the overall process and what came out of this. We also did include long-term improvements as part of this process, recognizing that these aren't the types of things that we can do in the short term, but hopefully they can provide some value as opportunities arise moving into the future for planning purposes. I wanted to give an example in Mandan as well. This is a great example. Again, another area that's not going to pop on your typical transportation planning regional efforts. This is Shady Acres. It's really unique. It's almost like an island, an oasis surrounded by transportation barriers. We have 2 railroad lines, the interstate system, I-94 business route, really lends itself to a very difficult space to get to, but also internally we've got a lack of a primary east-west route, despite having a pediatric center. And then also we don't have any north-south connectivity to connect these neighborhood routes together. So as we look at solutions, once again, trying to make those connections a priority, whether that be crossing Main or just connecting east-west and in throughout the neighborhoods. We also, on this one, as another example of the long-term improvements, looking at a potential railroad grade separation for pedestrians to connect them to the overall system, and then trying to connect that overall to funding opportunities such as a Reconnecting Communities grant, which is really designed for spaces like this that are disconnected from the transportation system and have some environmental justice concerns with them. We also looked at a variety of priority strategies. So this is a circulator route, which really started to generate a lot of interest and excitement through the process. You can see just on the right side of the screen, I think what's most important is less the perfection of the route. We 100% recognize this needs to be refined as you go through a process like this. But this is where we found the highest density of those key destinations for the vulnerable road users. So whether that be the hospital district, the soup kitchen, Berkeley Public Health, Community Action Great Plains, Dream Center, United Way, et cetera. And so really making a route that allows us to get two trips per hour to really circulate folks in between these key destinations. But even thinking about, a great comment we got from Ben, for example, as we were revising the draft was there is, some major priority neighborhoods to the west. Maybe we need to adjust that to get there. And so, again, recognizing that there's lots of different ways to perfect this, but I think this is a really good start and something that we do think is potentially feasible, and from a timing standpoint works out pretty well to be able to hit that twice with this route. From Mandan's perspective, it's a lot of the feedback we heard is it's very difficult from a transit user's perspective to reliably get to and from work or visit people on your schedule and through Mandan. There's just a little bit less frequency of transit and transit routes. So one thing we proposed was studying a little bit closer microtransit. For example, this is something we're looking at in Grand Forks. Just an additional study to see if there's better ways to serve this, kind of using in that space in between your fixed transit route and your ride-hailing technology. Is there kind of a combination, which is microtransit, to be able to service Mandan a little bit better? Another exciting area that we dove into was mobility hubs. Mobility hubs are essentially a centralized transportation location. So we can converge items like a heated bus shelter with our bike share, or maybe it's some ride hailing, microtrans, whatever it happens to be, kind of converge our transportation modes, but then also provide some of those transportation tangent amenities as well. And that could be a locker. That was really interesting. A lot of feedback we received is like the inability to jump on a bus and bring all your stuff if you're unhoused. Also thinking about other items like cash-based transit ticket kiosks for families that are all cash-based, bike repair stations. You can see a long list here, just trying to highlight a couple there. And then we started to identify a couple of the best fit locations from a starting standpoint. Again, I think that a big element is going to be refining this as we move forward. We see partnerships as being really, really critical, because not only do we need to maintain the services themselves, we also need to maintain the amenities and the operations of, let's say, the lockers. And so, for example, having a partnership with Ministry on the Margins could allow you to share the responsibilities of this facility. And so we identified lots of ways to advance implementation on this front as well. And then our last policy item and last slide here is just related to complete streets. What we didn't do is recommend a rigid process that both communities had to follow to be complete streets policy compliant or develop their own policy. What we did do is we connected the benefits that people have found by having a complete streets approach and then a process to be able to achieve that. So that's really built in through roadway design policies, procedures, and even project selection. But I'd say where we spent the most time from a complete street standpoint is kind of that 4 seasons element. Trying to design for ice and snow a little bit better as we think about projects moving forward, get some ideas, but also some snow clearing, whether that be through opt-in assessments or municipally led priority routes. We provided some good examples and ideas through that process, which should allow us to really take some of these ideas and move them forward for a more 4 seasons approach to complete streets. So with that, very quick and fast run through of a large document with lots of really unique and fun and beneficial ideas, but I'm happy to pause here and open it up for any questions or comments.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a great study, and that was a great report that you've provided to us, a good summary. Are there any questions from the members of the TAC regarding the study in general or the report itself?
Yep, thanks, Kim. I just want to maybe applaud the consultant group, and particularly for their engagement that they had with the various agencies and the public, and really going out to find them and find the users and find the people that we're trying to serve with this plan in particular, where they're at. So not trying to just put something up on a PowerPoint presentation or having a story map or some sort of input process, but doing those things as well as really engaging with those individuals where you can find them. So just accolades to them for that, because I think it gives us a better plan that's more actionable, gives us more things to sink our teeth into because it was informed by that input.
Thanks, Gabe. I would echo that. I totally agree. I believe that the consultant kind of went up above and beyond what we would typically expect for public outreach efforts. And I think it's very evident that it helped provide a much better informed report. Any other comments?
I'll just make a comment too. Yeah, I agree with Kim and Gabe's sentiment there. This was actually a really fun project to be a part of. And I guess the mark of a good study is if it's used and implemented. And I can say that there's a number of different efforts going on around the community in this even hasn't been formally adopted yet, but there's a lot of eyes at least in Bismarck using some of the recommendations and thinking how to move forward some of these recommendations. So it's I think going to be an exciting opportunity for both communities going forward.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Will?
Yeah, I'd like to say, even though I'm coming on to the back end of this, I've been watching this since its early infancy when it was talked about, and I have to say it's a very innovative study. It's a very appropriate study for the type of people it addresses, and I think this is really important. And so good work to the study team and everyone who was involved.
Any other comments? Or are we ready for a motion? What would be the wishes of the board?
Kim, do we need to, if we move to approve this, would it be contingent upon the acceptance of the city of Bismarck? Because I think they're meeting tomorrow on this item. Would that be appropriate?
Thanks for pointing that out, Ben. I guess that didn't come out through the presentation, is that this would not be a final acceptance on the part of TAC and Policy Board. Bismarck City Commission will be presented the final report tomorrow night at their regular meeting. And so we would be looking for a motion of approval contingent upon Bismarck City Commission approval tomorrow night. Thank you, Ben.
Yep, this has been so move.
Okay. We have a first. Is there a second?
This is Deidre, second.
Deidre, thanks. We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Ben Arith,
Yes.
Dan Triak,
Yes.
Deidre Hughes,
Yes.
Gabe Schell,
Yes.
John Sackey,
Yes.
Andrew Strami,
Yes.
Jarek Wigness,
Yes.
Greg Fazer,
Yes.
Dean Schloss,
Yes.
Will Hutchins,
Yes.
and Chair Ripple.
Yes. And the report has been accepted, contingent on Bismarck City Commission approval tomorrow night. Thank you all. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much, and I sincerely appreciate the kind words. It's very meaningful for us, and I'll pass it along to the rest of the team at Dale tomorrow.
All right, thank you. Moving on to number 4, the Arrive 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Jason Carby with HDR today.
Hello, am I coming through okay?
You are.
Okay, great. So I do have a presentation, but I was going to focus maybe on the changes that we've done so far since the TAC was very instrumental in reviewing the draft version of this. I wanted to kind of focus on what we've kind of addressed and what's happened since the draft document. And if it's beneficial to show the slides, I can. I will just start off by saying, so, you know, I think we had a draft plan in August and September, had reviews and comments from jurisdictions, NDDOT and FHWA. All of those comments were addressed in a kind of a comment response matrix. A lot of some of them were just kind of questions and queries, but I wanted to cover some of the biggest changes probably between the draft and the final. I think the baseline conditions was a very hefty chapter in the draft plan, and we've really focused on kind of streamlining that a little bit to enhance the readability. And so all of the comments that got incorporated into that are reflected in the final report. Some are ported over into an appendix, so the existing conditions is a pretty extensive appendix. And so we basically cut that down quite a bit to make it a little bit more readable. I think we were sitting at, and I've got Jeremy Williams on our team here with me, but we were probably sitting at 90 or so pages for the existing conditions chapter, and we cut that back pretty significantly. Funding chapter, we did have some comments about some of the uncertainties with forecasting non-discretionary funding sources like NHPP. We did just essentially kind of eliminate the references to forecasting those. We didn't really have projects associated with some of those state discretionary type programs. And so we went ahead and just removed those forecasts, just again, with a lot of the uncertainty as you know, Bismarck-Mandan and your partners kind of compete for projects with needs across the state. It's a little bit more uncertain than it's typical. So we went ahead and removed the forecast for those. I think those are some of the biggest changes. You'll see some graphically, it kind of has been updated quite a bit, trying to make it a little bit more readable, a little bit more visually appealing. And then I think the biggest thing also, obviously, is that we've been through the jurisdictional approval process. So as of last week, we did get through our final city commission, city council approval. And so we have gone through the planning and zoning and councils, commissions for all 5 jurisdictions. I think most of those were pretty limited comments and questions. We did have some folks kind of interested in some of the content, asked some questions about some of the projects that were included, but I think overall had very positive feedback. And I think those are kind of the highlights. I think if you all had a chance to look at the final version that's been out there on the web for a couple of weeks, and I think Kim included a reference to it in the packets, you'll see it's much more kind of streamlined and hopefully very readable. And I guess with that, Kim, I don't know, is there anything you wanted to add? And I do have the slides from the commission and planning and zoning presentations if we need to go through those, but I think you're all probably pretty aware of the content. So.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. At this point, I don't have anything to add to what you've already provided us, and then we can just go through that quick overview and take any comments at the end.
Okay. So go ahead and show the slides.
Do you have them up on Yeah, go ahead. Jason, can you share screen?
Yeah, sorry. Hopefully this works. Okay. Yeah, so real quick, wanted to give you a high-level overview. We're going to really walk through here all of the individual chapters, and just very high level. Sorry, I'm my screen share isn't exactly what I anticipated, so I'm having a few little technical difficulties. Hopefully, you're seeing what you ought to see here. Real quick, and I think you all know this, but the Metropolitan Transportation Plan is one of those core products that the MPO needs to put together every 5 years. It's a 2050 plan, so we're looking out 20 years plus to the year 2050. Multimodal in nature, and we need to come up with a fiscally constrained list of projects. It's federally required, but it's an opportunity to kind of tailor the plan to local preferences. And so it's really about checking the boxes on federal requirements, aligning it with the North Dakota's long range transportation plan, but also coming up with useful measures and making sure it aligns with the regional vision. And so as you recall, we had kind of 8 goal areas that were kind of the framework for how we went about developing the plan. Very extensive public engagement. We had online and in person. We had 3 different milestones where we met with members of the public. Had, I think, a couple of meetings at the Bismarck-Y. We had the July 3rd in downtown Mandan, Art in the Park, and kind of had pop-ups where people were, but also had, surveys and online meetings as we went throughout. Also met with you all quite a bit. We did have a stakeholders committee that gave us some input early on. The chapter on essentially the Bismarck-Mandan today, and essentially just trends in housing, trends in commuting, employment, kind of set that baseline. The existing conditions chapter, this is the one I referenced that have been cut back pretty significantly. Looked at it from a very, a range of perspectives, but also, focused on the locations of crashes and safety incidents that happened, but also looking at regional trends. Touched on congestion, started to look at, emerging areas of congestion as we got into the future conditions. And summarize kind of the overall multimodal, kind of where we sit with that multimodal system in this chapter. We did, as you all know, work through kind of how the community is going to grow into the future. We are anticipating about, 30, 40% growth in population, households, and employment. Looking to the future, kind of looked on an allocation of where that housing growth would be, where that employment growth would be. And that really fed kind of those travel patterns and how we anticipated them to shift. And as you know, we kind of worked through a range of, looking at different alternatives, see how they might move the needle in terms of, what projects might do the most to kind of relieve some of those corridors where we were starting to get, congestion and safety issues starting to pop up when we've got too many vehicles on kind of a cross section that can't accommodate it. Next chapter kind of looked at that toolbox of strategies, all the different opportunities for types of improvements as we kind of identified those potential issues in each corridor. This range of project alternatives, as you recall, was looking at taking care of the system that we've got today. Whether it's rehabilitation, managing it through signal or safety projects. Opportunities for new connections with the new Northern Bridge crossing, new interchanges, and also focusing on kind of building out the 1 mile and arterial grid in those growth areas. From a funding perspective, you're all in industry. This doesn't surprise any of you, but we're anticipating over the long term that the transportation purchasing power goes down. We've got 2% annual growth in revenues was kind of the general assumption that we have. There was a little bit of variation by program there, but that we anticipate costs will continue to increase about 4% per year through the planning horizon. And so just some quick summaries on some of the programs here. We did, working very extensively with you all, come up with a fiscally constrained plan. This is a kind of a combination of all of them for the short term, midterm, and long term. In all that range of, whether it's a rehab, a safety, expansion, or kind of a transportation alternative type trail rehab or new trail connection, those types of projects are shown here. And then the final chapter was just demonstrating, how we have this kind of locally tailored plan, but also kind of fit with those federal requirements. And then the last one is just our thanking you and asking if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Jason. Any questions for Jason at this point or comments?
Kim, I just have a comment. Jason, I thought you did a nice job again, as per usual, on the MTP. This is also an exciting project to work on. They're always exciting. And you also did some pretty innovative things, reaching out in different ways to the public. It's difficult to get public engagement. This is probably one of the more difficult plans to get public engagement in, is the long-range plan. But seemed to be some effective strategies that you used. I guess I would just note something that I don't recall happening before, but I think this plan sort of sussed out maybe a unintended consequence of some, particularly urban roads allocation requirements that basically leave the MPO pretty much focused on more preventative maintenance type projects for the short-term projects. There's a much heightened focus on that in the near term, just because the MPO jurisdictions are no longer able to bank funds as maybe they once were. And I'm not sure if that is the intended consequence of how those federal funds should be allocated, but that's definitely an outcome that I think we're seeing from that. And I'm not sure that's the most flexible opportunity for us going forward, but it's the I guess the circumstances we have to deal with. And thanks for sort of working through that process, Jason.
Thanks, Ben. Any other comments or questions?
Kind of realized we needed more bite-sized projects, I think. So.
Yeah, I think that we might have some more continuing discussions regarding the urban program funding opportunities and potential banking of funds. I guess DOT has provided some guidance to us while not entirely encouraging us to use that option. They are providing some options to possibly bank funds. However, it could be risky business as we move into that, and it may be a risk that we don't want to assume. But I do believe that there will be more information and further discussions taking place as we move forward with the consideration of our urban road funding. Anything else? Gabe?
Maybe I just want to point out one other thing, and it's no fault of the plan, but just so that we as the practitioners that will use this plan, or the public that views the plan in the future, it's pretty much silent on the urban regional projects within our community, those state highways in Bismarck, Highway 83, 1804, et cetera, in Mandan, 1806, Main Avenue, et cetera. That doesn't come through our allocations to our community. It's just determined more of at a statewide level, those types of projects and the statewide priorities for those dollars. So it's not that we're not going to plan and program those types of projects. It's just that we won't use this plan to probably tell us when that next, mill and overlay should be, or when we might implement the changes that were previously recommended on the Safe Routes to Services study. I mean, that's going to be something outside of what this plan will do. So it's no fault of this plan, but if someone happens to read through it and realizes why aren't we talking about State Street, or why aren't we talking about University Drive, it's just not the focus of what this plan will do. So just wanted to point that out. But thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Gabe. Any other questions or comments at this time? All right. Well, I would just like to extend my thanks to the HDR team, Jason, Jeremy, Craig, and the rest of your team. The update to the MTP is always a long and arduous process. You guys do an excellent job of sticking to it, and not only that, you almost seem like you gain steam and momentum at the end. So going through 10 separate governing body or advising body approvals at the end is not an easy task, and you do a great job of it. So I thank you.
And I would be remiss if I did not thank all of you up there for your role in helping shape this. And all the extra time you made to kind of review some ideas, reshape them. I think you've been a great group to work with, so really do appreciate that.
So in regards to the final report of the Arrive 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, what are the wishes of the board?
This is Gabe. I would move to approve.
We have a first, and is there a second?
This is Jarek. I'll second.
Jarek, thank you. A motion and a second to approve the MTP. Roll call, please.
Ben Arith,
Yes.
Dan Shriak,
Yes.
Deidre Hughes,
Yes.
Gabe Shell,
Yes.
John Sackey,
Yes.
Andrew Strami,
Yes.
Jarek Wigness,
Yes.
Greg Fazer,
Yes.
Dean Schloss,
Yes.
Will Hutchings,
Yes.
and Chair Ripple.
Yes. Arrive 2050 MTP is approved or recommended for approval. Thank you. Moving on to number 5. I'm sorry. Did I hear? Okay. Thanks, Jason. Moving on to number 5, the 2024 pavement condition collection and analysis. Kurt Kiefer contacted me this morning, informed me that regrettably he was unable to attend the meeting this morning. I will let you know that the pavement conditions collection and analysis project is wrapping up. There was a project report included in your packet. Also, the final report, draft edition, basically, was also included in the packet for technical review. It has been made known to me that there are some questions and concerns regarding that final report, and given the fact that we do not have QES personnel available to answer those questions or to address any concerns, I think that it may be suiting to provide a motion of continuation to allow the consultant to address concerns that are provided by our technical staff. This report is scheduled to be completed and wrapped up by 12/31 of this year. So that does give them a couple of weeks. I did talk to Kurt Kiefer last week, Thursday, and he indicated that they would be working on the draft report that is in the packet through today and tomorrow's presentations. So I'm not sure if there has been a delay in that or not, but at least if we continue this item, we could give the consultant another couple of weeks to finalize everything, and we could bring it back to our TAC and Policy Board in January.
Kim, or maybe anyone on TAC here, what is the extent of the work that still needs to be done and corrected with this work, and do you have a good sense that it'll be done by the end of the year, or are you going to move into possibly needing a contract amendment to push into 2025?
Yeah, thanks, Will. So in my discussions with Kurt last week, it was my understanding that they would have had everything wrapped up in time for adoption by Policy Board tomorrow at their meeting. However, I don't know exactly how long a delay we might be looking at now. There have been additional questions that have come up from one of the jurisdictions, one of the participating partners, and so I would definitely want QS to have the opportunity to address those. I guess I can't put any words in their mouth, but my hope would be that we could see this finalized and completed by the end of the year.
Thank you. And then you would be presenting it as the MPO for the final adoption?
Correct.
Yep.
Any thoughts to that, or? Okay.
Kim, I'm the one, or one, I guess maybe you've had others too that had questions on some of the data that's in here, roads that we've constructed in 2023 that show up as a unsatisfactory PCI. It makes me wonder, like, well, is it just a formatting thing? Is it just a mislabeling? Was this the wrong figure attached? Was this the prior to the 2024 collection version of this map, which I think could be, but until we get that answer, I guess I just want to feel comfortable approving the plan as presented. So I guess I'd make a motion to continue this to the January meeting.
Okay, thank you, Gabe. I have a motion to continue this plan. Is there a second?
This is Jarek. I'll second.
Jarek, thank you for the second. Roll call, please.
Ben Harris,
Yes.
Dan Shriak,
Yes.
Deidre Hughes,
Yes.
Gabe Schell,
Yes.
John Sacking,
Yes.
Andrew Strami,
Yes.
Jarek Wigness,
Yes.
Greg Fazer,
Yes.
Dean Schloss,
Yes.
Will Hutchins,
Yes.
Chair Ripple.
Yes. Thank you. This will be continued until such time as participating jurisdictions' comments can be addressed fully, and we will present the possible acceptance of the final report in January. All right. Moving on to number 6 on the agenda. It's a state fiscal year 2026 Bismarck Transit applications for the 5339 and 5310 grants. Paulette Jacobson.
You click on the first one, on the page number, and then you can scroll down.
Thank you, Chair. Give me a moment here. Page 125 in our packets begins the first of the 2 applications submitted from Bismarck Transit. Thank you. North Dakota Department of Transportation has again this year solicited for their state fiscal year 2026 sections 5339 and 5310 grant programs. Section 5339 is a bus and bus facilities program. Section 5310 is the Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities program. Bismarck Transit is requesting approval to submit the grant applications for both of these programs. And on page 125 begins section 5339 application. Bismarck Transit's application, they're applying for 1 fixed route bus. Also, extra funds needed to complete the purchase of another fixed route bus partially funded under another existing grant, 1 power floor scrubber, and 8 fat tire bike racks. And if awarded, the federal share would be $755,050, and transit would provide a local share of $135,950. Totaling project is $891,000. And Exhibit J begins on page 137. Section 5310. Bismarck Transit's application is for after-hour service, Sunday service, holiday service, early morning service, and the salary for their existing mobility manager position. The application also includes a request to purchase 4 new cutaway buses. This is to replace the existing paratransit vehicles that have exceeded their FTA-defined useful life. There are 9 projects total in this application. If NDDOT approves all the projects, the total federal share would be $860,504, and transit would provide a local share of $333,236. This application is scalable, so NDDOT could award any or all of the projects in the application. And both transit application programs will be presented at tomorrow's December 17th Bismarck City Commission meeting, and staff is seeking a recommendation by TAC for the approval of the 5339 and 5310 applications contingent upon the Bismarck City Commission approval tomorrow. And are there any questions or comments, or if Deidre, if you'd like to add anything for that?
Oh, okay. Any questions for Paulette? Okay, so staff is looking for a motion to approve the 5339 and 5310 grant applications contingent upon Bismarck City Commission approval tomorrow night. Do we have a motion?
Chair Ripple, I'd move approval with the contingency of the City of Bismarck approval.
I have a motion from Andrew Strami. Is there a second?
This is Jarek. I'll second.
Thank you, Jarek. Roll call, please.
Ben Arith,
Yes.
Dan Shriak,
Yes.
Deidre Hughes,
Yes.
Gabe Schell,
Yes.
John Sacking,
Yes.
Andrew Strami,
Yes.
Jarek Wigness,
Yes.
Greg Fazer,
Yes.
Dean Schloss,
Yep.
Will Hutchins,
Yes.
Chair Ripple.
Yes. Okay. Grant applications for the 5339 and 5310 programs are recommended for approval contingent on Bismarck City Commission approval. And moving on to number 7 is fiscal year 2029 urban regional projects. That is Exhibit K in your packet, beginning on page 155. This year we had 5 applications that were submitted to the MPO for the urban regional program. This is for funding year 2029. All 5 projects were submitted by the City of Bismarck. On December 3rd, the Prioritization Committee met to discuss and prioritize the urban regional projects. All 5 projects, which were submitted by the City of Bismarck, were prioritized by the City of Bismarck based on their perceived need within their community. Engineer Schell described the Bismarck projects. He provided the committee with his prioritization, which is included on the table on page 155 of the packet. MPO staff scores for each project were shared in the second from the right-hand column, but as all projects are consistent with several of the objectives of the MTP, the points are only provided for points of discussion, and they didn't impact the prioritization suggested by the City of Bismarck. Also, North Dakota DOT District Engineer Dean Schloss expressed no concerns or objections to the suggested prioritization that was presented by City of Bismarck. So MPO staff supports the recommendation of the committee and the prioritized rank of projects as shown on the table. At this time, I would look to Gabe Schell to provide us any additional information that he would like to.
Thanks, Kim. I guess the only thing I would add is all of these projects were previously submitted through this process, either last year or previous years. Updated costs and maybe some other concepts fleshed out a little bit more would be the only changes that we've added over time.
Okay, thanks. Any questions for Gabe on his projects? If not, staff would be looking for a motion to recommend approval of the 5 urban regional projects submitted by the City of Bismarck in the ranked order as listed on the table.
This is Jarek. I'd move to approve.
Jarek, thank you for the motion. Is there a second?
I would second. This is Gabe.
Gabe, thank you. Roll call, please.
Ben Arith,
Yeah.
Dan Shriak,
Yes.
Deidre Hughes,
Yes.
Gabe Schell,
Yes.
John Sackey,
Yes.
Andrew Strami,
Yes.
Jarek Wigness,
Yes.
Greg Fazer, Dean Schloss,
Yes.
Will Hutchings,
Yes.
and Chair Ripple.
Yes. 5 projects in prioritized order are recommended for approval to the Policy Board for submittal. Thank you. Number 8 is fiscal year 2029 Urban Roads Project. That is Exhibit Q in your packet, beginning on page 181. You can see that we had 1 application submitted to the MPO for this fiscal year 29 Urban Roads Program funding. The submitting jurisdiction was the City of Mandan. The MPO and its member jurisdictions met with representatives from North Dakota DOT to discuss the FY29 Urban Roads Program and the available funding for the Bismarck-Mandan MPO area for fiscal year 29. Deteriorating conditions of the current partially urbanized roadway and increased traffic volumes due to the new Mandan High School have made the reconstruction of this section of road a priority for the City of Mandan. And because of this, the City of Mandan has proposed swapping out this 8th Avenue Northwest and 27th Street Northwest project for funding that's already programmed for the fiscal year 27 Old Red Trail reconstruction project. This would push the Old Red Trail reconstruction out to fiscal year 29. Based on the discussion, direction received from North Dakota DOT, and the consensus reached, staff recommends approval of Mandan's 8th Avenue, 27th Street reconstruction project to be promoted as a program project for fiscal year 27, swapping it for the Old Red Trail reconstruction project, which would then be considered for fiscal year 29 program. This is a project that's come before us several times. We really thought this was going to be in the FY28 program. DOT informed us that just because of having to move some projects around, there wasn't enough funding left in that program to fund this, and so this swap seemed like the best way to get the funding necessary to move this program or this project forward. Jarek, would you want to give us any more information on the project itself?
Nope, I think you said it better than I ever could, so.
Oh, okay. Are there any questions on the project or the swap that's been proposed?
Kim, this is Gabe. Just on the question on the swap, can you maybe walk through the dollar amount? Is it just a dollar for dollar thing, or is there any increases or decreases considered?
Thanks, Gabe. So as part of the application that was included in the packet, there is the North Dakota DOT program table, and it does show that the 2027 project for the Mandan Old Red Trail was funded at a $4 million level. Now, this particular project is a little bit over that, so it would still be funded at the $4 million level, which is the funding that is programmed for fiscal year 27, and that would bring $1.683 million into the local jurisdictional cost for that project. Is that what you're looking for, Gabe?
So the project for 2029 on 8th Street is a little bit more than 4 million in federal funds, but all that's going to be used on that project is 4 million because that's what was already in the books for 27.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Makes sense to me. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. We'd be looking for a motion to recommend approval of the 8th Avenue and 27th Street Northwest project to be swapped with the Old Red Trail for fiscal year 27 funding, and then Mandan Old Red Trail considered for fiscal year 29 funding.
So moved. This is Gabe.
Gabe, thank you for the motion. Is there a second?
This is Jarek. I'll second.
Jarek, thank you. Roll call, please.
Ben Arith,
Yes.
Dan Shriak,
Yeah.
Dieter Hughes,
Yes.
Gabe Shell,
Yes.
John Sackey,
Yes.
Andrew Strami,
Yes.
Jarek Wigness,
Yes.
Greg Fazer,
Yes.
Dean Schloss,
Yes.
Will Hutchins,
Yes.
Chair Ripple.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. Number 9, fiscal year 2025 Urban Rail Highway Crossing Safety Program projects. Stephen Larson.
Thank you, Chair. Give me one moment. Okay, so Exhibit S in your packets, page 193, contains a summary of the 2025 Urban Rail Highway Crossing Safety projects that we received for this fiscal year. The MPO received 2 projects from the city of Bismarck. We determined the projects are consistent with the MTP, but we do not have a list of objectives in the MTP for scoring urban rail projects. Also, DOT's solicitation for this program is less formal than most of their other grant programs, so we do not have to submit an application form to them for this. We have not historically recommended prioritizing urban rail projects when forwarding to DOT, so we are also working with a 100% federal funds through 2026 for this program, so any projects that DOT chooses to approve will be funded completely federally. So the first project that we received is on the 26th Street Railroad crossing between Main and Bowen Avenues in Bismarck. That kind of illustrated in Exhibit T. Oh, excuse me. I put this in the wrong order. Don't know how I did that, but there we go. Exhibit U, excuse me. The proposed work is at the 26th Street Railroad crossing between Main and Bowen Avenues in Bismarck. This would involve the installation of additional panels on the west side of the railroad crossing to function as a sidewalk for pedestrians and to complete the recent pedestrian improvements that were made in the project area. So the second project, which is actually ahead of the first one, is Exhibit T, and that is at the 24th Street Railroad crossing in Bismarck between Main Avenue and Front for the replacement or removal of the southern 2 railroad crossings. Any crossing that is determined to not be in use would be removed, and if any crossing is still being used, it would be replaced. So yeah, that is a summary of the projects that are being proposed for this year. Are there any questions?
Stephen, and maybe this is a question for Gabe. Can you remind me why these weren't included in the quiet rail zone at the time that was implemented? And then I have a second question on the 26th Street side. I see the city has installed a sidewalk. Will that ensure that there is a link that then gets them to a dedicated path to get to the people who are walking to the Bismarck-Burley Public Health Building?
Sure, I can take both of those. The quiet rail, I guess, concept I think was focused more on the downtown area. So in that time, the 3rd Street, 5th Street, and 12th Street crossings were what were identified, and didn't really get out to 24th or 26th out here. There's less residential population out here, and I think that was one of the drivers of trying to have those quiet rails in areas of higher pedestrian activity as well as with the residential adjacent properties. Specific to the improvements at 26th Street, we have installed sidewalk, or the adjacent landowners have installed sidewalk, everything up to the railroad right-of-way, and then this is kind of the missing gap that would be to complete the rest of the route. I should note that anytime we've engaged with the railroad, they come at from a different safety perspective. Their idea of a safe crossing is to remove the pedestrians from here, or remove even vehicular traffic. We've visited with them already on 24th Street, and their first question was, could we close 24th Street to vehicular traffic? That would be the safest solution, which is true. So we're trying to find that balance between vehicles using the roadways, pedestrians using the roadways, but then trains crossing those same areas. And we're coming at potentially from different perspectives. So this 26th Street in particular, we've asked that for a couple of years, and that's been a standing request that we've had with the DOT and with the DOT highway rail program manager, but it gets to that perspective of what does the railroad want, and this isn't really high priority sometimes to make pedestrian crossings better in those areas. But we'll try this process. And maybe the comment would be here, as well as many of these other solicitations that we do. I don't want the public to walk away from these meetings thinking these are going to happen. What's going to happen is we're going to ask if these projects could be considered favorably. That's what is going to happen with these things, and we hope that it can take the next step and the next step after that. But in no way does this mean that we're building these two things. It just means that we're applying for some funds to hopefully improve what's out there.
Thanks, Gabe. Any other questions on the rail projects? So, Stephen, are we looking for formal approval or recommendation of approval of
Yes,
these projects?
staff would be seeking a recommendation of approval to send these to NDDOT unprioritized, as has been the historic practice.
Okay. Do we have a motion to that effect?
This is Gabe. I would move to approve.
Motion by Gabe Shell, second.
This is Jarek. I'll second.
And a second with Jarek. Roll call, please.
Ben Arith,
Yes.
Dan Shriak,
Yes.
Deidre Hughes,
Yes.
Gabe Shell,
Yes.
John Sankey,
Yes.
Andrew Strami,
Yes.
Jarek Wigness,
Yes.
Greg Fazer,
Yes.
Dean Schloss,
Yes.
Will Hutchings,
Yes.
Chair Ripple.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. Number 10 is the 2025 Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP contract.
Yes, and I can share my screen for you here.
All right, great. That's Exhibit V in the packet, beginning on page number 199. This is a standard annual contract between North Dakota DOT and the Bismarck-Mandan MPO regarding their Unified Planning Work Program. The DOT has started tying these contracts to a specific consolidated planning grant year, and so these are annual contracts. Again, this is a standard contract. There are no one-time changes on this. However, this year, DOT did make one change, and that is that the contract is by and between North Dakota DOT and the City of Bismarck on behalf of the Bismarck-Mandan MPO. And the reason for that is that all of the MPO's funding moves through the City of Bismarck and then becomes a reimbursement type situation through the Consolidated Planning Grant. So this would be for the calendar year 2025, beginning January 1st and continuing through December 31st of 2025. The contract amount is for up to a maximum of $684,174. That is the federal portion of the Bismarck-Mandan MPO's Unified Planning Work Program, as indicated in the UPWP that was just recently approved. And this particular contract has already undergone contract review successfully through the City of Bismarck, which is their requirement prior to the signing of any contracts. It will be brought before the Bismarck City Commission for final approval tomorrow night at their meeting on the 17th. And so today, MPO staff would be looking for a recommendation of approval contingent on Bismarck City Commission approval tomorrow night. Are there any questions regarding this contract, the process, or the motion?
Kim, I would make the motion to approve the UPWP contract contingent upon the successful adoption at the City of Bismarck Commission meeting.
All right, thank you, Ben. I have a first. Is there a second?
This is Jarek. I'll second.
Thank you, Jarek. Roll call, please.
Ben Arith,
Yes.
Dan Shriak,
Yes.
Deidre Hughes,
Yes.
Gabe Shell,
Yes.
John Saki,
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Andrew Strami,
Yes.
Jarek Wigness,
Yes.
Greg Fazer, Dean Schloss,
Yes.
Will Hutchings,
Yes.
Chair Ripple.
Yes, thank you. Motion passes. Moving on to number 11, the 2025 Monitoring Report Update with Stephen Larson.
All right, really short and sweet. So we solicited 6 consultants for our 2025 monitoring report update and received 2 proposals. MPO staff scored these proposals per our request for quotes, and we selected HDR to perform this update as our consultant in 2025. I am in the process of contract negotiations with the consultant. The project is due to start early 2025, pending the finalization of our UPWP contract, which we just approved. So we're excited to get started with this. Any questions?
Any questions for Stephen?
Stephen, where did that land on the total price? I know I talked to Rachel in a previous employment role about this study or this effort. I'm just kind of curious, was it still under the 50,000 mark?
Yeah, it is still not to exceed a 40,000.
Gabe?
So has this effort been done internally in the past and now is being done externally, or maybe can you speak to that as well, Stephen?
Yeah, that's correct. It has been done internally in the past, but for one thing and another, we haven't been able to complete an update since well before I started here. So probably been about 5 or 6 years since the last update, and it was determined that we wanted some outside expertise to update the data and formatting and mapping that's included with this report, and to also seek jurisdictional input on what would be of value for us to provide to all of you with this report. And so our hope is that throughout this process, we may also be set up to continue future updates in-house. That is actually part of the reason why HDR was selected, because they do include MPO staff training in their proposal for this project.
Yep, thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen. Oh, let's see. It's still Stephen. 2025 meeting calendar. Exhibit W.
Yes, give me just one moment. I'll share screen. All right. Wow. Just really simple. The last page of your packet, Exhibit W, is just our 2025 meeting calendar. Nothing too interesting to note, except I will mention January and February's meetings are for TAC are going to be Tuesday morning as opposed to Monday, because both of those meeting dates fall on holidays. So that is a noteworthy, and also a reminder for everyone that starting in January and going through June, we will be in the Tom Baker meeting room downstairs in Bismarck, and we will return here next July. Anybody has any questions? Otherwise, that's all I have.
All right, thank you for those good reminders, Stephen. We don't want people showing up here in January wondering where the meeting is, so that's great. Any other business for the good of the order? Gabe?
Kim, I corresponded with Kurt Kiefer. He might be on the line now from QES.
Oh, okay.
Are you able to see if that's the case and if you could maybe address?
We would welcome any comments that Kurt could provide for us? Kurt, are you on the line? I'll try one more time. Kurt Kiefer, are you online with us? Can you hear us? Okay.
So never mind that. I guess maybe the email that I got from him might have been in error or some technical difficulties.
We tried. So,
thank you.
All right, it was worth a try. Thank you. Any other business at this time, Ben?
Kim, yeah, I can just provide a kind of an update on from a staffing perspective. Kim, you've done a terrific job stepping in and filling the role of the executive director on an interim basis here. We do have 2 finalists for the position that will be interviewing. There'll be an interview panel that's been established, and we'll be looking kind of mid-January time frame for that interview. I don't know that it'll be in time before the next TAC and Policy Board meeting that decision is made, but I would expect certainly by the February meeting we should have somebody identified for that role.
Thank you very much for that update, Ben. Appreciate that. Any other business? Okay, well, with that, I would just like to wish everybody safe and happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next year.